President Trump today keeping up his criticism of player protests from the NFL, tweeting about the ongoing controversy. Not once, not twice, not three, but 4 times this morning. The latest tweet reading, the NFL has all sorts of rules and regulations. The only way out for them is to set a rule that you can't kneel during our national anthem. That one coming the morning after more players joined in on the protests, along with one of pro football's most famous owners. America's teams, Jerry Jones. He took a knee last night before the national anthem played. The Cowboys and Arizona Cardinals locked arms during the anthem itself. Meanwhile, more athletes in other sports are now joining in. I want to bring in Marc Morial, president and CEO of the National Urban League, sports commentator and Washington Post contributor John Feinstein. Also with me, he is author of the novel Backfield Boys. It's a football mystery in black and white. I have not read it yet, but I heard Mike Wilbon talking about it, John. Says it's a great book. So let's talk about where we are with this ongoing controversy. Let me start with you, John, because this is, I feel like, perhaps more of a sports question, this first one. If the league does decide to institute what the president has suggested, some sort of rule that requires athletes to stand during the national anthem, what would be the result? What would be the consequence?
Oh, I think you'd see if the tried to do this, especially without collectively bargaining it, because remember, the NFL has a union, a players union, and I think this would have to be collectively bargained. But if they tried to unilaterally impose such a rule, I think you would see even more players and coaches getting involved in kneeling or sitting, as most of the Oakland Raiders did before games. And it would just, what the president has done is he's just ratcheted up this controversy. It started with one player, Colin Kaepernick, protesting against police brutality, and now it's ratcheted up to this point because A, the NFL owners blackballed Colin Kaepernick, and then B, the president came out and said that owners should, quote, fire the SOBs who don't stand up for the anthem. So he's just creating more and more of an issue here.
Well, and Marc Morial.
It's not going to happen. The NFL is not going to impose a rule at this point, and I agree with him that the president took what was a protest by a small handful and has made this a nationwide movement.
And he's also made it about himself. And I mean, I think you have a lot of these athletes who would not be on their knees or locking arms had it not been for...
It's so interesting because the president also interposes himself as though he's the commissioner of the NFL. And I think why you saw a reaction from the owners is because here's the president saying to another group of business people, here's how you should run your business. Here's who you should fire and what to fire them for. What's important in all of this discussion, Craig, let's not lose sight of the reason for the original Colin Kaepernick protest, and that is racial disparities in America, issues of justice with the police and the criminal justice system. It was heartfelt, and I might add, he sat down at first, but then after he consulted a former player who had been a Green Beret, Nate Boyer, I think his name is, he decided to kneel to try to underscore the this was not, if you will, a protest against the troops. It was a protest against the policies and the actions and the misconduct that's taken place in this country unabated over the last many, many decades.
John, you
Craig,
go ahead, John.
I think it's worth remembering, too, that this is a president who said there were fine people on both sides when the KKK staged their march in Charlottesville, and yet he's using profanity directed at football players who are staging peaceful protests. And to me, there's a lot of hypocrisy there, and I think even the NFL owners, many of whom gave money to President Trump, see that. And that's why you're seeing the response that you're seeing to this. And of course, the president always makes everything about himself. That's who he is.
Craig, you know, the NFL players, I have a great deal of pride in the players, in people like LeBron, in how they have comported themselves. Because remember, even if one objects to them kneeling during the national anthem, their actions are peaceful. Their actions are consistent with the tradition in this country of peaceful resistance and peaceful protest, all the way back to 1773 and the Boston Tea Party, through the women's suffrage movement, through civil rights, through Muhammad Ali, through Billie Jean King in sports. This idea that people would protest it's uniquely American, and it is what the flag essentially stands for.
Alejandro Villanueva, John, he's the Army vet, as you know, the Steelers player, that lone player that was at the edge of the field on Sunday as the rest of the Steelers stood in the tunnel. They were in the locker room in protest. He has since said that he regrets not being a part of it. But his jersey is now the top selling in the NFL. Do you think perhaps that this is a situation that is going to turn into President Trump and the fans, the players and the owners?
Well, I think it's President Trump and some fans. I mean, he knows how to play to his base. That's what he's doing here, is he's playing to his base by claiming that anybody who stages a peaceful protest is, quote, un-American. And remember his initial reaction to Colin Kaepernick during the campaign. He ought to find another country. So he's playing to his base. I don't think anybody in that Pittsburgh Steelers locker room had a real issue with Alejandro Villanueva, who's deployed to Afghanistan 3 times and is a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy, being out there for the anthem, even though he said he felt like he let his teammates down. The whole point of this is that everybody should be free to do what they want to do. That's what the president and his base is saying. No, 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 you're not free. You will do what I say you should do because I am offended by your actions, whereas those people are not allowed to be offended by his actions.
These actions by the president have taken a sport, football, which is really a unifier, something that unifies fans and unifies communities, and he's injected division in it. I think that even those who objected to Colin Kaepernick did not suggest, quote, that he should find another country or, quote, be fired. And I agree that he's been, if you will, blacklisted from the NFL. The fact of the matter, after looking at the first couple of weeks of football, I see plenty of places that could use a talent like Colin Kaepernick under center, not to name any teams. But football is still the #1 televised spectator sport in America.
All right. John, thank you, sir. Mark, always good to have you.
All right,
as well.
great.